welcome to another episode of FooBar. Today we are getting started with Lambda. If you want to know more about serverless, cloud computing, or software engineer practices in general, subscribe to my channel in the red button below. I post videos on Tuesdays and on Thursdays and sometimes on Mondays and sometimes on Wednesdays, whatever. So let's get started. So this is a continuation on the video I launched last week when we talked about what is serverless, and now I want to talk about what is Lambda. Today we are going to see how to get started with Lambda. We are seeing some of the properties of Lambda, some of the features of Lambdas, what you can do with it. It's just a very basic video, but I think it's a good starter if you are new in the serverless world and you want to get started with Lambda. We are going to build our first Lambda, and I will show you which path you can go after you finish watching this video. Basically, before getting started, I want to make a clarification because Lambda gets confused. We have first the Lambda service or the Lambda platform, and that's the one handling your Lambda functions. So the functions are the individual things that are running. So you deploy a function that does hello world, and you have that function. Then you have a function that does, I don't know, thumbnail, and you have that function. And then the Lambda platform, the Lambda service, is the one invoking those functions, getting the triggers, and doing all that type of things. So that's first. So the definition for Lambda function is very close to what is the definition for serverless. Lambda lets you run code without provisioning or managing servers. Just upload your code and Lambda takes care of everything required to run and scale your code with high availability. And then you can set up your code to automatically trigger from other AWS services or call it directly from an HTTP endpoint or something like that. So we said that we have different ways to trigger the Lambda function. There can be changes in the state, like a new message in a queue, a new record in a table, a new file in storage, a request in HTTP, somebody press a button. So many things can trigger a Lambda function. Lambdas are written in multiple languages, and when they run for 15 minutes, and they can do anything you imagine. They can call other AWS services, they can call third-party APIs, they can do some business logic, do some processing, whatever you imagine, it's possible. And then the triggers, we have all kind of triggers. We have triggers, for example, a new file in an S3 bucket is created or deleted or modified. A new record in Dynamo is added, removed, modified, kinesis data stream, new messages in the stream, new users incognito. Then we have CloudWatch events, like, every 6 hours we do something. Or we have X amount of memory in our EC2 instances, and that triggers a Lambda. We have, a pipeline going on, and we trigger a Lambda to do some validations, API gateway, AppSync, step functions, all these kind of things can trigger Lambda, Alexa. Also message events like queues, notifications, emails, all of these things can trigger Lambda, and way more things as well. As I say, Lambda can be run in multiple programming languages. Node is supported, Python, Ruby, Java, .NET, and Go are supported out of the box. You just basically need to use the provided versions of them. Not all of the versions are supported. So for example, for Node is Node 12, and for the other languages you need to check which version is available. But if you need a specific version of a runtime, or you need other runtime, I don't know, COBOL or Kotlin, that's Java, or I don't know, something else. When you're trying to think about Rust, I don't know, you can bring your custom runtime and it's no problem. There is examples of using Dino, there is examples of doing Swift, there is examples using Rust. You can find them all around, and there is even examples using COBOL. So that's something you can do. So you can make your Lambda in your own preferred runtime if you don't like the ones that we provide. How Lambda is built? Well, it's built on two kind of characteristics. The amount of time your code is executing, so 100 millisecond increments. So every 100 milliseconds we are billed. So if you run for 2 milliseconds or for 98 milliseconds, we charge you for the full 100 milliseconds. And then it's also charged by the amount of requests. So depending how many times lambdas are invoked, then you are getting charged. If you're using an account that is on the free tier, and this applies to all accounts, because this free tier is not only for the first months, it's also for all the time, you will get the first million requests of Lambda for free. So that's quite generous. And then you get 400 gigabytes seconds of compute time. So that is related to those 100 milliseconds increase that you're billed. They are built based on the memory that you're consuming and also in the time. So it's a complicated equation, but you can find more information in the AWS calculator, where you can check how much these services will really cost. Or then, as I like to do load test. I run it a couple of, hours, 1 or 2 hours, and see with the traffic that I'm planning to get how much this will cost, because it's way easier. When you have a Lambda function, you will see that there are kind of two parts of the function. The first part is the infrastructure configuration, and then we have the code itself, what it needs to run in the Lambda function. So here, this is quite different than when you have maybe, well, it's not, but maybe as a developer, you're not that in contact with your container infrastructure configuration, where it's running or what is going on. When you're working with Lambda functions, you really need to have that configuration, and you will be very close to it, and you will see it a lot. And when we get started with Lambda functions, you will see how we are all the time defining that infrastructure configuration and not only the code. So in the configuration, we can define things like who is going to trigger this Lambda function. Is it going to be an API gateway, or it's going to be a new message in a queue, or it's going to be, I don't know, somebody press a button or something like that. That's going to get defined in the configuration of the infrastructure. Also, one of the few infrastructure things that we can define is the memory allocation, how much memory this Lambda function will have. We can go from 128 to I don't know how many gigas of memory, and that's something we will define as well when we are using the infrastructure configuration. One thing to note is that the memory and the processor power are kind of related, so the more memory you allocate, the faster your function will run. Functions are running on AWS infrastructure that is provisioning for you, and according to the amount of memory you say you need, AWS will give you better machines in order to run your code. So that's why the processor and the compute power increase. Another thing you need to define when you're defining your infrastructure configuration is what kind of runtime you're using. So you're using Node, Python, or a custom runtime, and also the permissions that you're going to give this Lambda function to have. So all AWS resources are born without any permissions, and you need to assign permissions to them. So if this Lambda function wants to store something in a table, or wants to get some data from a bucket, or wants to put a message in a queue, you really need to give the permissions to the function in here in order for the function to be able to do it. So then we have the code part, and here this is an example using Node, but they all look more or less the same, and they have the same bits and pieces. So this is how it looks. It's a very simple function that is just returning 200 in an HTTP request. And we can see here that we have the handler function, the handler definition of the method, and this is where the code is starting to execute. So basically, when you define in the infrastructure, you will need to define where is your entry point to this Lambda function. We will see it in a moment, and in this case will be this handler method, and this is what is going to get executed upon of invocation. So this is the start of your application. Then we have the event object that is passed through the handler, and that's data that is sent by the resource that is invoking it. So here, if you are using HTTP, You will see all the HTTP headers, the authorization if there is one, the body if there is one, what is the HTTP verb, put, get, post. You will see also the path, you will see also query string parameters, you will see everything, it will come here. So that's what it's in the event. Every event object is different depending on who triggers the Lambda. So if it's a new file in S3 that triggers the Lambda, then you will have in the event object things that are related to S3, like the bucket, the key of the element that was added, what was the operation, and things like that. Then if it's a message in a queue, we will tell you the, I don't know, the queue name and blah, blah, blah. So every event object is really depending on the invoker of the Lambda function. And then we have the context object, and this context object provides a lot of methods that are available to interact with the runtime, and also there is also information from the runtime. So we will have here information on how the memory is allocated, if there is some kind of tracing ID. There is all kind of information that is more stable. All Lambda functions will have similar information, and you can use it to create metrics and to figure out how your Lambda is behaving. So this is pretty interesting, and we will look at this in this series as well. So now let's go to the console and create a Lambda function so you can see how easy is this, and then you can understand the both sides. So let's go. So now I log into my AWS management console. I rarely create Lambda functions from here. I usually like to do it as infrastructure as code, but that is coming in following videos. In this video, I just want to show you the most normal way to get started. So I go here to, in my management console, I go and type Lambda, and this will open the Lambda kind of interface. So I have a couple of Lambdas deployed, but ignore them. And you can see some information of my Lambdas that are deployed. Don't worry about that. Let's create a new function, and then we can see what is inside there. So we have many options to create our first function. We can create it from scratch, use a blueprint, or use the serverless application repository. I will create it from scratch. I will leave you a link on how to use the serverless application repository in the description box, and I recommend you to check the blueprint so you can see what kind of things you can do. Here are very complex examples, but I want the most simple thing, and I want to show you the most simple thing to get started. Later in the series, we are going to build on top of that. So let's put a name, and I will put my first Lambda. I will put a runtime. I will keep Node, but here you can see all the ones that are supported. So you can bring your own runtime. You can use any of these that are here, or you can pick Node 12 as I'm doing. Then we can add permissions, and here I already, I will keep this create a new role with the basic Lambda permissions. So that's okay. And the advanced settings I'm not touching. We don't need a VPC, a virtual private, I don't know, network. Oh, here it is, virtual private cloud. I don't need that, so let's not add that. So this is creating the function. It takes a few seconds, and when it's ready, it will redirect us to the function page. Good, our function is created. So here we see a lot of information. The first thing we see is the designer, and we can see our Lambda function is just floating there. It doesn't have a trigger, and it doesn't have a destination. The destination, we don't need to go there. If you want to know what destinations are, I'll leave you a link in the description box. But for now, let's focus on the trigger. Let's add a trigger, and we can select here from all the available triggers that are out there. There are quite many. So we are going to pick API Gateway. And here we are going to create a new API. So I will click here, Create API. I will create an HTTP API. That is our new types of API. I will leave it open, so we don't need to have any token for it. And then I think we can just go with that. Chuku, chuku, chuku. This takes a second. And now our API will trigger this Lambda function. What else is here? Then we can see the details of the API. So we can have the endpoint here, and we will go there in a second. Then we have the Lambda function, and when you click, you see this whoop, and we can see the code. And this code is basically returning a 200 hello from Lambda. And in this case, I will not change it because I don't want to really show you a lot of things. I want to just show you how the console looks. So now we can test it. But yeah, let's test this. So let's open this, click the link. And now here we can see the hello from Lambda. So that's what we are calling the Lambda function. So here we have the permissions tab, and here is where all the permissions are given to Lambda. When you create a Lambda function, because of the helper tools, it will give access to CloudWatch, so you can see and add logs to CloudWatch. So that's something that comes basically by default, and that's kind of the only permission that this function has. So if we would like that the function adds something into Dynamo or write something to S3, we'll need to give the permission. So that's something it's important to do. We will see how to do that in a following video. And then we have the monitoring, and here you can see the basic things from Lambda. So soon, this takes a while, we should be seeing like a little dot of the invocation that we did here. So if we call it multiple times, then it will appear multiple times. We can also see the logs of this function in CloudWatch. So I don't know if it's writing something in the logs, but if it is, we will see it here. There is something, so that's good. There is some logs, and it's not writing anything, it's just writing the start and the end. So there is not really much. And then the report, and the report tells us how long the function executes. So this function executes for 2 milliseconds, and we are billed for 100 milliseconds. It also tells us the memory, and it tells us how much memory it used, so that you can see in the report. So if you want to, for example, modify the Lambda function and you want to modify the memory, you can go and click Lambda function, then continue going down, and here you can edit the memory. So we have from 128 to like 3 gigas. So if we give more memory, this is pointless because this is very small function, then this will run faster. So we will not see that because it's already taking 2 milliseconds. But if you like to see a video on performing optimization for Lambda, I'll leave it in the link below, because there we talk in details on how you can optimize the memory allocation. But yeah, so that's something you can define here. Then you can define the timeout. I said that Lambda function runs for 15 minutes, but that's something you need to define, that it will run for 15 minutes. If you leave it by default, it runs only for 3 seconds. So if whatever is in your Lambda functions takes longer than 3 seconds, the function will terminate. So that's something you need to be aware of, and you can also define it here. So let's go back to the Lambda function and see if the monitoring changed. Yes, so now we can see we executed this 4 times. So we can see it in the last hour. And there was, the maximum duration was 25 milliseconds. That is what is called the cold start, first invocation of the Lambda function. That usually takes a little longer. And then the following invocations in average took 10 milliseconds. There was no errors, everything is in 0, and then the rest doesn't really matter. So we had only 1 concurrent execution at the time because we don't have much traffic. So you can see the cold starts, for example, in here. So where you can see it. So initial duration, this is basically the report on the cold start. You will not see it in the other ones. So I will make a video exclusively on cold starts in the future, so stay tuned for that. When it's available, it will be in the description box of this video. So that's it for today. Now you've seen how to create your first Lambda using the console. Now you can decide what you want to do next, and I will recommend you that you look at what is infrastructure as code and you pick one way of working with Lambda functions. When you are using AWS, you have multiple options. You have CloudFormation, AWS SAM, CDK, Amplify. So pick one and do your functions like that. I will leave you links on the description box on SAM, CDK, and all that stuff. And I will be talking to you about infrastructure as code and more things like that in future episodes. If you like this episode, please give a big thumbs up and let me know what other topics you are interested in seeing in future episodes. I'm always interested in making content that you want to watch. So I see you next week with another episode of FooBar. Ciao, ciao!